The Kyle Tucker sweepstakes has become the most fascinating and frustrating saga of the entire offseason, and we're now deep enough into the winter market that legitimate questions are emerging about why one of baseball's premier outfielders remains unsigned. Tucker, a perennial all-star and one of the game's most complete players, was expected to sign quickly once free agency opened, commanding a massive contract befitting his elite production and relatively young age. Instead, day after day passes with Tucker still on the market, his asking price reportedly around $400 million, creating a standoff between what he believes he's worth and what teams are willing to pay. And one of the most intriguing potential destinations, the Los Angeles Dodgers, may have just been definitively ruled out by a veteran MLB analyst who believes LA's checkbook simply isn't big enough for this particular acquisition. Rob Parker, the veteran analyst appearing on MLB Network, made a declarative statement that sent shockwaves through the baseball community and particularly Dodgers fans who've been dreaming about Tucker patrolling right field at Chavez Ravine. Parker stated bluntly that the Los Angeles Dodgers will not sign Kyle Tucker, that the franchise door is effectively closed for the star outfielder despite all the speculation and rumors connecting the two sides. His reasoning cuts to the heart of roster construction philosophy and financial limitations that even the game's richest franchises face when building championship teams. According to Parker's analysis, the Dodgers simply don't have the financial flexibility to go all out on Tucker's asking price. If Los Angeles had unlimited capital with no constraints whatsoever, adding Tucker would be a no-brainer decision that wouldn't cost them anything in terms of competitive balance, tax penalties, or future payroll flexibility. But the reality is far more complicated. Even the Dodgers, despite their enormous revenue streams and willingness to spend on elite talent, don't have an infinite checkbook. And committing $400 million to a single player, no matter how talented, creates ripple effects throughout the entire organizational structure that impact every other roster decision for years to come. Parker's assessment is particularly striking because it contradicts the prevailing narrative that's dominated Dodgers offseason coverage. For months, analysts and fans have speculated that Los Angeles represents the perfect landing spot for Tucker. The Dodgers need outfield help, particularly in right field where they've been searching for a long-term solution. They have the financial resources that smaller market teams lack. They offer an immediate championship window that appeals to star players in their prime. And they've demonstrated repeatedly that they're willing to make aggressive moves to acquire elite talent regardless of cost. But Parker is making a different argument entirely. He's suggesting that the Dodgers have looked at their overall payroll situation, evaluated their competitive balance tax obligations, considered their other roster needs, and determined that $400 million for Kyle Tucker simply doesn't make financial sense even if they could technically afford it. This represents a fundamental shift in how the organization approaches roster construction, prioritizing financial flexibility and sustainable competitiveness over short-term superstar acquisitions. The context for this decision becomes clearer when you examine the Dodgers' spending patterns over the previous two seasons. The franchise has invested more than $1.5 billion in player salaries over that period, an absolutely staggering sum that dwarfs what virtually every other organization has committed. They signed Shohei Ohtani to the largest contract in professional sports history. They extended Mookie Betts. They've added Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, and numerous other high-priced talents. By any reasonable standard, the Dodgers have been the most aggressive spenders in baseball, and it's not particularly close. But apparently, even the Dodgers have limits. After committing that $1.5 billion over 2 years, the organization has consciously chosen to tighten their belts during this free agency period. They're not being cheap or penny-pinching in the traditional sense, but they're being more selective and strategic about where they allocate resources. The 3-year, $69 million contract for closer Edwin Diaz represents their only major addition so far this offseason, a significant signing that addresses a clear roster need, but nothing close to the franchise-altering megadeals that defined the previous 2 winters. This shift in spending philosophy makes sense from multiple perspectives. First, There are real consequences to exceeding competitive balance tax thresholds, particularly when you're in the highest penalty tiers that the Dodgers currently occupy. Every dollar you spend over those thresholds costs significantly more than a dollar due to tax penalties, and those penalties increase the longer you remain above the threshold. At some point, even organizations with the Dodgers' resources need to reset their tax status to avoid permanent penalties that would genuinely constrain future roster construction. Second, the Dodgers have enormous financial commitments already on the books extending years into the future. The Ohtani contract, despite its deferred structure, still represents a massive long-term obligation. Betts, Yamamoto, Glasnow, Freddie Freeman, and others are all locked into substantial deals. Adding Tucker at $400 million would create a situation where the Dodgers have 5 or 6 players consuming the vast majority of payroll, leaving minimal flexibility to address other roster needs or respond to unexpected opportunities. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the Dodgers have demonstrated that they can win championships without acquiring every available superstar. They just won back-to-back World Series titles with their current roster construction approach. While adding Tucker would certainly make them even better, it's not clear that he represents the difference between winning and losing in October. The marginal improvement he provides might not justify the enormous financial commitment and loss of future flexibility. Parker's analysis suggests the Dodgers have made a calculated decision that their current outfield situation, while not ideal, is workable with internal options and more modest external additions. Teoscar Hernandez is returning. They have young players who can contribute. They could pursue less expensive veteran options who provide 80% of Tucker's production at 20% of the cost. For an organization as sophisticated as the Dodgers, that value proposition might make more sense than breaking the bank for Tucker. But not everyone agrees with Parker's assessment, and the counter-arguments are compelling. J.P. Morosi, another respected MLB Network analyst, has taken the opposite position, arguing that the Dodgers absolutely have the financial power to sign any player this year, including Kyle Tucker. Morosi's reasoning focuses less on pure dollar amounts and more on the organizational advantages that make Los Angeles an attractive destination regardless of money. Morosi points out that free agent players are considering the Dodgers not just because of the paycheck, but because it's a team that aspires to and competes at the highest level every single season. For a player like Kyle Tucker, who's in his prime and wants to win championships, the opportunity to play for an organization with the Dodgers' track record of success is enormously valuable. Money matters, obviously, but so does winning. And if the Dodgers can offer competitive compensation while also providing the best chance to win World Series rings, that combination might be irresistible. Morosi's perspective also acknowledges that the Dodgers' financial situation, while complicated, isn't actually prohibitive when it comes to major signings. Yes, they've spent $1.5 billion over 2 years. Yes, they have massive commitments on the books, but they also generate revenue that dwarfs what most organizations bring in. Their television deal alone provides financial resources that smaller market teams can't match. When you're generating that much revenue, spending on elite talent isn't financial irresponsibility. It's smart business that creates a feedback loop of success, generating more revenue that funds more success. The fundamental disagreement between Parker and Morosi comes down to different assessments of organizational priorities and financial constraints. Parker believes the Dodgers have hit a practical spending limit where committing $400 million to Tucker would create more problems than it solves. Morosi believes the Dodgers' revenue streams and championship aspirations make Tucker affordable and desirable regardless of the sticker shock. So who's right? The truth probably lies somewhere between these two positions. The Dodgers almost certainly could afford Kyle Tucker if they determined he was the right fit for the organization. $400 million is a massive number, but it's not insurmountable for a franchise with Los Angeles' resources. The question isn't whether they can afford him in absolute terms, but whether they should afford him given their other priorities and roster construction philosophy. Andrew Friedman and the Dodgers front office have consistently demonstrated a reluctance to overpay for players even when they have the financial capacity to do so. They're not in the business of winning bidding wars just to prove they can spend more than everyone else. They're in the business of identifying value and constructing rosters that maximize championship probability while maintaining long-term flexibility. If they believe Tucker's asking price exceeds his actual value to the organization, they'll walk away regardless of whether they could technically afford the contract. The Kyle Tucker situation also reveals broader trends in the current free agent market that are affecting multiple players and teams. Tucker isn't the only star remaining unsigned deep into the offseason. Several high-profile players who were expected to sign quickly are still available, suggesting a fundamental disconnect between player expectations and team willingness to pay. This could be driven by teams becoming more analytically sophisticated and recognizing that mega contracts for players in their late 20s rarely provide positive value over the life of the deal. Or it could be collusion-adjacent behavior, where teams are collectively deciding not to engage in bidding wars that drive prices to unsustainable levels. For Tucker specifically, the $400 million asking price represents a significant gamble for any organization. He's an excellent player, absolutely, with a track record of consistent production and all-around excellence. But he's also entering his prime years with the back half of any long-term contract likely to see declining performance. Teams are becoming increasingly aware that the final years of these massive deals are often albatrosses that hamper roster flexibility rather than providing surplus value. The Dodgers, given their recent spending spree and current roster composition, might have decided they're better served spreading that $400 million across multiple players rather than concentrating it on a single outfielder. They could sign 3 or 4 quality players for that price, addressing multiple roster needs, rather than creating a superstar-heavy roster that lacks depth. For a team that's already won back-to-back championships, maintaining depth might be more valuable than adding another superstar. There's also the question of positional value and roster fit. The Dodgers need outfield help, but is right field really their most pressing concern? They have bigger questions in the infield, particularly if they don't retain certain players or if injuries affect key contributors. They could use additional starting pitching depth. The bullpen, despite recent additions, could always use more quality arms. Spending $400 million on Tucker might address one need while leaving others unresolved. Rob Parker's declaration that Tucker will not go to the Dodgers carries weight because it's such a definitive statement from someone with deep industry connections. He's not saying it's unlikely or that the Dodgers are long shots. He's saying the door is closed, which suggests he's heard from sources close to the organization that Los Angeles has definitively moved on from the Tucker pursuit. That's significant information that shouldn't be dismissed, even if it contradicts what fans want to hear. But Parker could also be wrong. We've seen situations before where analysts declare certain moves impossible only to have them happen days or weeks later. The Dodgers are notoriously secretive about their intentions, and they've pulled off surprise signings before that nobody saw coming. Until Tucker actually signs with another team, the possibility remains that Los Angeles could re-enter the conversation if circumstances change or if Tucker's asking price drops to a level the Dodgers find acceptable. The uncertainty surrounding Tucker's future is genuinely remarkable given how the offseason began. He was expected to be one of the first major free agents to sign, commanding a massive contract from one of several organizations with the payroll capacity to afford him. Instead, we're well into the winter with Tucker still unsigned, his market apparently softer than expected, and genuine questions about where he'll ultimately land. This situation could resolve several different ways. Tucker might lower his asking price to a level that makes the Dodgers or other teams comfortable committing. He might hold firm at $400 million and eventually find an organization willing to meet that number. He might pivot to a shorter-term deal with higher annual value that provides opt-outs and more flexibility. Or he might remain unsigned well into spring training in a standoff between player expectations and team offers. For Dodgers fans specifically, Rob Parker's comments are disappointing because Tucker represented the dream scenario for upgrading the outfield. He's young enough to contribute for years, talented enough to be an impact player immediately, and proven enough to eliminate the risk associated with prospects or reclamation projects. Crossing him off the list of realistic possibilities narrows the options for improving that position and forces the organization to explore less exciting alternatives. But there's also something reassuring about an organization that has spending limits and strategic priorities rather than throwing money at every available star. The Dodgers' success over the past several years hasn't come from reckless spending, but from smart roster construction that balances star power with depth, analytics with scouting, and short-term competitiveness with long-term sustainability. If walking away from Tucker at $400 million is what that philosophy dictates, fans should trust that the organization has good reasons for that decision. The Edwin Diaz signing, while not generating the same excitement as Tucker would have, represents exactly the kind of move championship teams make. They identified a clear need at closer, targeted a player with a track record of success in that role, and signed him to a reasonable deal that addresses the need without mortgaging the future. If the Dodgers make several more moves like that, adding quality players at multiple positions rather than one superstar, they might end up with a better overall roster than if they'd committed $400 million to Tucker. JP Morosi's counterpoint that any free agent should want to play for the Dodgers because they compete at the highest level every year is absolutely valid and shouldn't be dismissed. The Dodgers offer something unique in baseball: consistent championship contention combined with organizational stability and a proven track record of player development. For players who prioritize winning above all else, that's an incredibly attractive package, even if the dollar figures aren't the absolute highest available. The question is whether Kyle Tucker prioritizes winning over maximizing his contract value. If he's willing to take slightly less money to play for a championship organization, the Dodgers could absolutely still be in play despite Rob Parker's comments. If he's determined to get every available dollar and won't compromise on the $400 million asking price, then Parker is probably right that Los Angeles has moved on. What we're witnessing is a fascinating case study in modern baseball economics where even the richest franchises face real constraints and must make difficult choices about resource allocation. The Dodgers can't sign everyone. They can't acquire every available star. At some point, even they have to prioritize and make strategic decisions about where to invest and where to exercise restraint. Kyle Tucker is an exceptional player who would improve virtually any roster in baseball. But exceptional doesn't always mean necessary, and necessary doesn't always justify any price. The Dodgers appear to have decided that at $400 million, Tucker represents more risk than reward given their current roster composition and long-term financial commitments. Rob Parker believes that decision is final and the door is closed. JP Morosi believes the Dodgers still have the capacity and motivation to sign him if circumstances align. Time will tell who's right. But regardless of where Tucker ultimately signs, the debate about whether the Dodgers should pursue him reveals important truths about organizational philosophy, financial sustainability, and the complex calculations that go into building championship rosters in modern baseball. What do you think? Is Rob Parker right that the Dodgers' door is closed for Kyle Tucker, or could JP Morosi be correct that LA still has the financial power and competitive motivation to make it happen? Should the Dodgers prioritize one superstar signing or spread that money across multiple quality players? And if Tucker doesn't end up in Los Angeles, what should the Dodgers do to address their outfield needs? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more coverage as this fascinating offseason continues to unfold.